Right, hello, just before we get into this video, I am aware that the video quality in it is very, very grainy. So I would recommend listening to it as a podcast style, but if you can put up with a grainy video, then feel free to watch it. There's plenty on screen for you to watch as well, like normal. Hopefully you can let me off, but enjoy the rest of the video. Hello and welcome back to the Premier League preview on my channel. This is week 10 of the Premier League preview, the only place to go to keep up to date with everything that is going on in the Premier League. Just a quick recap on last week before we jump into this week to make sure you're all caught up on everything. So it was a pretty straightforward weekend last weekend with no real shock results. We had Chelsea beating Newcastle 2-0. Even though Chelsea looked like they were struggling to score at times, they still managed to get the win. Brighton then had a bit of a shock beating Aston Villa, who've been in fine form, but 2-1 deserved win and finally a payoff for Brighton's good form. Spurs then played a classic Jose Mourinho tactic by parking the bus, very little possession, but managed to get a 2-0 win over Manchester City. Saturday was then rounded off with my prediction of the week, Bruno Fernandes scoring a penalty against West Bromwich Albion to clinch Manchester United all 3 points. What followed on Sunday was a real goal fest in the first game as the Toffees, Everton, beat Fulham 3-2. West Ham then continued their fine vein of form as they beat Sheffield United thanks to a fantastic Sebastian Haller strike. Really top draw strike then, did not expect that from Sebastian Haller. The next game was then Leeds United versus Arsenal, and the show was stole by Nicola Pepe getting sent off for a silly red card. Headbutting is always going to get you sent off in the modern era. Liverpool then provided what looked like a shock result on paper as they beat Leicester, but before the game they did have a very strong squad out, so Liverpool fans were a little bit relieved there. They managed to get Fabinho and Matip both back into the squad as they won 3-0 against Leicester. Monday was then rounded off with two very important games. Burnley got their first win of the season as they won 1-0 against Crystal Palace, and Wolves and Southampton played out a 1-1 draw at the Molineux. Like I said, some interesting results there and some that you didn't really expect. Liverpool to win 3-0, did not see that coming this week. Leicester didn't look great though in that game, and I'm sure that'll give Liverpool fans lots of confidence having beaten Leicester last week. But looking forward to this week's fixtures, we have another Friday night match. So when this video is finished, be sure to get on over and watch the football. Crystal Palace and Newcastle United are the two teams playing on Friday night as they look to get back to winning ways after defeats last weekend. Saturday then sees Brighton and Liverpool face off in the early kickoff. That is then followed by City, who take on Burnley. Leeds and Everton then face off at what would be about the 5 o'clock game, and the final game of the day is West Brom, who take on Sheffield United. That could be a real relegation scrap this week with West Brom taking on Sheffield. Both teams in poor form, but both teams looking to really start their seasons now after disappointing starts. Sunday then continues as Manchester United take on Southampton, which could be a really tricky game for the Red Devils. The big game is a Jose Mourinho derby, it is a London derby, and it is Chelsea who take on Tottenham Hotspur. The final game on Sunday then sees Arsenal go and play Wolves, which again is another massive game for both teams. Real decider here of who's going to have a good season. If Arsenal have another bad game, you've got to be questioning Mikel Arteta's strategies and plans. Monday then concludes the action with Leicester, who take on Fulham, and West Ham, who take on Villa. The first team I have chosen in the teams to watch category this week is Arsenal. I mentioned them last week and they really didn't perform very well in midweek. They were very lucky to, in midweek? It's not midweek, it's the weekend. At the weekend they were very lucky to really get a point from that game. Leeds were absolutely dominant and Nicola Pepe made a fool out of himself, getting sent off for a headbutt. Arsenal face Wolves, not Fulham. Arsenal face Wolves, and Wolves have really been a very mediocre side this season. They've beaten who you expect them to beat and they've lost to who you expect them to lose to. So it's one of them games where Arsenal really need to put a shift in, because they definitely have the quality in their squad. They need the likes of Aubameyang and Lacazette to really start getting some goals. Aubameyang has only scored once since the opening day of the season, and that is not what you expect from a Golden Boot winner, or a former Golden Boot winner, should I say. Mikel Arteta needs to change something though in his side in order to get them firing up front. They've looked very, very weak at times, and they haven't looked like they've got goals in them, and I think that's a real worry for Mikel Arteta, especially now that he's got Nicola Pepe sent off, who is someone who can create chances and score some goals for Arsenal. Whilst they may only face Wolves in the context of things, not the biggest of teams, but Wolves will be pushing for top 8, and that is without a doubt. Wolves will be looking to make the most of Man City, Man United and Arsenal's poor starts and get their place firmly cemented in the European places. Like I said, Wolves haven't really beaten anyone who you wouldn't expect them to beat, nor have they lost to anyone who you wouldn't expect them to beat. So Wolves are a team that could be very tricky for Arsenal this weekend, and I think you should keep your eye on them to see if they actually score some goals, because defensively Wolves has been one of the most impressive teams so far this season. I believe they're on 4 clean sheets in total, so if it carries on like Arsenal have been playing, then they're definitely not going to score and they're really going to struggle. The next team I have chosen is Fulham. After a really slow start against Everton, they started to progress into the game in the second half. 3-1 down at half time is always a massive ask of any team, but in fairness to Fulham, they really showed a gutsy performance in that second half. They need to sort out their penalty takers. It was addressed on Match of the Day when I watched it. They really needed to sort that out, because that is, as Bruno Fernandes proves, is a source of goals. And if Fulham can start scoring these goals, start getting them, games and points will come easier to them, and I think it's really important that they do that. I do feel like I keep choosing Fulham, but I think Fulham have been desperately unlucky at times this season. In the last 4 games they've only lost by 1 goal, which is credit to them that they put up a fight, and they haven't been far off it all season, other than the game against Villa where they lost 3-0 and the opening day match against Arsenal. They haven't been far off the pace, and they've just been quite unlucky at times as well. So this weekend I'm really looking forward to seeing Fulham play, to see if they can carry a little bit of the momentum and the confidence that must have grown in the second half of the Everton game. Yeah, they faced Leicester, but Leicester last weekend were very unconvincing in that Liverpool game, and they'll be hoping that Leicester won't have their confidence high again. They'll be hoping to tap into maybe some of the ideas that Jurgen Klopp put on Leicester last week, because Leicester very much stood off Liverpool and went, there you are, have the ball, you can have it, and Liverpool played round them. And I do think this Fulham side has a lot of quality. I'm looking forward to seeing how they play this weekend and ultimately where they finish at the end of the season, because they just need a few breaks of luck, like with the penalty at the weekend, just need a few breaks of luck and Fulham will be right in contention this season. The final team I have chosen for the teams to watch category this week is Manchester City. For me, Manchester City have been the most disappointing of the teams so far. That may sound harsh because United aren't doing great, Arsenal aren't doing great, Sheffield have obviously had their issues, but we're used to these teams having these sort of issues. It's been a very long time since Manchester City had these kind of issues, and Manchester City reached, I believe it, what was it, the quarter-final, the semi-final of the Champions League last year? It must have been the quarters. Yeah, it was the quarters, wasn't it? Anyway, side note there, but they are a very good team, and on the day they probably are the best in the league, joint with Liverpool. Still up for debate who's better out of them. However, this season they've been really disappointing, and like I said, Arsenal and Man United, yes, they've not been great, but we're used to seeing that from these teams now. They're not what they were in their former glory, and we're used to seeing that, these inconsistent performances, but we aren't used to seeing this from a Pep Guardiola side, and he needs to gain some momentum, he needs to gain some confidence in this team that they can do well and they can perform well still in the Premier League. And they face Burnley this weekend, and Burnley are off the back of their first win, so they're not going to be any pushovers. They're going to want this as much as Manchester City are going to want this. They want to keep a bit of momentum going, whether it's taking a point, whether it's taking all three. Burnley want to take points this weekend, and as a consequence of that, Manchester City are going to have to be on top form. They've really disappointed me so far this season. I have no doubts that they are going to kick on. It's when they do kick on that is the real big question. And I think this weekend, if they get a result against Burnley, who are obviously full of confidence now, it could be a real big turning point for a team such as Manchester City. Moving on to the players to watch section this week. As always, be sure to leave in the comments who you think the 3 players to watch will be this week. You've got just 3 players, you can choose anyone you like, but who do you think will be instrumental in what games? So I'll jump into mine. The first one I have chosen is Thiago Silva. The reason I have chosen this is I think he should be starting. Realistically, he should be. He has been instrumental for Chelsea so far this season. I think it's a real big turning point, and it could be a really big game for Thiago Silva in a Chelsea shirt. I think he hasn't really had much problems so far. Yes, okay, he didn't have a great debut against West Brom. I'm not acknowledging that. But since then, since he's not had the captaincy and not had that on him, it has changed. Stuff has changed in the team, and he's a much more confident defender, and I think he will be the player to watch in Chelsea's defence. Of course, Kurt Zouma gets up, he'll get a goal, no doubt. He'll be up for corners and stuff like that. But I think defensively, Chelsea very much gravitate around Thiago Silva, and that's exactly what Frank Lampard brought him in to do. But against Tottenham, against Harry Kane and against Heung-min Son, that's going to be a whole new ball game, and it's going to be a real test. It will be a massive test for Chelsea and Thiago Silva this weekend. And I think Thiago Silva still needs to prove himself a little bit, because otherwise his greatest legacy is going to be the fact that he slipped against West Brom. And we all know he's more of a better defender than that. We all know he is. You know, he reached the Champions League final last season with PSG, and he is a very quality defender. And he has been for years for Milan, for PSG, and for Brazil. And he just needs to bring that legacy to the game at the weekend, and I think he'll absolutely be fine. I think he'll do a great job. But like I said, Manchester City, Tottenham are very much a different outfit this season. We saw that against Manchester City. That's why I was going to say Manchester City. We saw that against Manchester City this weekend, that they are now finally moulding into Jose Mourinho's fit and playing that park the bus strategy, which worked so well for Jose Mourinho. It worked at Chelsea, it worked at Tottenham. It didn't really work at Manchester United though, but you might have to blame that on some of the transfers which they made there. Anyway, getting sidetracked again. But Thiago Silva this weekend really needs to prove himself, and if he can keep Kane and Son quiet, then I think a lot of the doubters will go away, because these two are two of the most in-form attackers on the planet. The next player I've chosen to watch this week is Richarlison. Richarlison has just returned from his suspension. Who did he get that against? Liverpool, that was it. He got the suspension against Liverpool for a tackle on, I believe, Thiago. He's just returned to the squad, and against Fulham he was very influential. Even though he didn't get a goal himself, I think he very much goes under the radar for Everton. I think he's one of those players who doesn't get enough credit for what he does, and I think we could tell the impact that him and James Rodriguez have on the game, because when they're both fit and they're both able to play together, it's a completely different game. But at the weekend, James Rodriguez wasn't, the star man, and Calvert-Lewin got 2, but I really think a lot of the problems which Fulham faced came down that left, and that was with Digne and Richarlison, who seem to have a great bond. The reason I've chosen Richarlison though is, like I say, I think he's a little bit underrated for what he actually brings to a team. He can get in behind, he can swap with Calvert-Lewin, he can come in a little bit more inwards, play in the number 10 role if you really needed him to. And I think that is something that Everton really need to exploit, and I think that Leeds need to watch out for this weekend. The final player I have chosen this week is Diogo Jota. Jota from Liverpool, that's what we're going to settle with. I'm not going to try to pronounce his first name. He has an O in it instead of an E, so I don't think it's Diego. It must be Diogo. Anyway, what a start he has made for Liverpool this season. It has been truly fantastic. He's shown himself to be the complete player. A much more developed player as well than what we saw at Wolves. I'm sure Wolves fans will tell me that he's been fantastic for them and that he had all these qualities, but from an outsider we never really saw this, and I think it's because he's been given the opportunity in more of a central role. It wasn't expected for him to get the goals, but since Mane, his goals haven't dried up, but since Mane hasn't been contributing as much in the goals department, and obviously Mo Salah has been out with COVID over the last week or so, and Firmino's not been up to his goal scoring best either. Jota has really made an impact. He's got 4 goals in 4 games at Anfield. He scored a hat-trick in the Champions League. And I think he is a player to watch this weekend. I think against a team like Brighton, maybe he won't play. Maybe they might rest Firmino, but he might not even play. But he's been so fantastic, and Liverpool's front 3/front 4 with him included has really benefited from having him in the team. And I think he's been one of their best players so far, and one of the best signings of the season. I mentioned Thiago Silva earlier. He's been a great signing for Chelsea, but Jota, for the instant impact, has been a really good signing. And Liverpool won't have picked up as many points as they would have done had they not signed Diogo Jota or had Jota in those positions this season. Anyway, that concludes this week's Premier League preview. I've tried not to speak on for like 15 minutes, but I have a really bad feeling I managed to do it again. So I'm going to try and shorten the videos for next time to keep you guys entertained. However, if you do like the longer videos, be sure to let me know. It's always up to you guys. I just want to produce content that you guys like. So let me know in the comments, of course. Drop a comment, let us know what video ideas you want. If there's one specifically you want me to talk about, absolutely drop it in the comments. And be sure to subscribe. We're trying to hit 60 subscribers by the end of the year now. So I'll see you on my next video, and stay safe.